So this spiritual world, the metaphysical world, is actually what's driving the physical world. Although the physical world exists and physical things can be used to help you or harm you. Okay. I'm talking to somebody there. It's all based in the spirit. And again, this idea where you bring things upon yourself generally does not exist. Generally does not exist. People are willing things, cursing. Some people live their whole life just to curse people. Now you'll hear me use Jewish curses, but the fact is they all go through God. I don't project my own will into any of it, and if God doesn't want it to happen, then it won't happen. Very early on, upon awakening, I was only knowing about the healing, and I went around healing people and had some very bad things happen to me. And then the spirits picked up and said, well, cursing, you could curse them because, Paul cursed, whatchamajigger, Bar Jesus. And I started doing that. And then I said, well, maybe that was an error. So I made parameters that I could never do anything outside the will of God. Like if I said anything outside the will of God, that it wouldn't effectuate. Have no weight, have no direction, go nowhere. And then I also said, that we shouldn't curse people, we should heal them. So I went around healing people and stopped any action in that direction. Well, then it picked up again, but this time it was the fact that I was going to simply open the way for God to move in those directions. So again, when I was in Tyler, Texas, evil was extensive. No matter what I did, was met with a wall of failure. I mean, I am much more well here in Amarillo. However, I haven't been able to completely control this thing. Now, I've had episodes in my life where I've had something similar, but not this intense. And each time it ended with steroid shots into some part of my body. So again, it could be something that's, people would say fibromyalgia, but I think there's an allergic trigger. It triggers my muscles to do it, and then to get out of it, I have to reverse it. Now, the doctor yesterday was about 3/4 there. He thinks it was just muscle cramping from some sort of movement, but my theory is that my muscles become susceptible to that based upon something. But he said if you uncramp the muscles, then everything should stop. So again, massage therapy, I had one 1-hour session of massage therapy. That appeared to work better than anything that I've done the whole time. It's just, the problem is every night it's cramping back up. It's cramping up during the day, and then I got to try to release it again. So it's damaging tissue, but not as bad as it was. And when I left Tyler, Texas, it wasn't as bad as it was in the beginning in Tyler, Texas, but it was still there because I was able to leave, obviously. But I'm not sure that epidural got me very far. I mean, it got me a certain distance as far as relief, but a simple steroid shot in each one of those muscles or areas would have probably relaxed it even more so. So that is what it is. It's a windy day here in Amarillo. It's going to get, I guess, windier and rainier tomorrow, or maybe just rainier. It says it's going to go up in the 90s. I guess the sun will be out at some point, but it's a very cool morning. The hot part of the day is starting to decrease, which is fine by me. This cool air feels great on my inflammation. Hopefully I can recreate somewhat what happened in Espanola when I had something similar happen 8 years ago and be healed to the utmost, I guess they would say. So I'm still in the beginning stages of healing. I think if I could have got to physical therapy, it may have worked a little bit. It was just the cramping was so intense. I don't know if, the problem is with physical therapy, it means a lot of different things. There was no way I was going to be able to get somewhere. My doctor used the wrong terms, put it that way. She said, you need to get moving in physical therapy. And I'm thinking, I can't move. It's just not going to work. Now, if she had said, like this doctor here that I spoke to from Houston yesterday, he said, you'll go to physical therapy. They have an electrical stimulation machine, and it will help uncramp your muscles. If my doctor said that, I'd have been there, and I would have used my TENS unit. I'll tell you though, I looked at my TENS unit about 15 times. What happens is, if somebody in a position of authority poo-poos the use of your TENS unit, then you're not going to use it, or it's going to break, or you're going to die trying. So this is what we're dealing with. I mean, I don't know. I have to get to the point where I know my back uncramps and this works, but there's certain points of the day that if I work my back extensively, it relaxes and I feel much better. And a guy here told me, he said he had a nerve in his shoulder, and he would, always be bouncing his shoulder off the wall, and I'm bouncing my back off of the corner post. He said until one day he slammed it real hard, and then it never bothered him again. So I don't think that's my future, although I think a massage therapist will be able to massage the tissues back to where they need to be. And see, I don't know if it could have been done in not Naples, Florida, in Tyler, Texas. And there might be a Tyler, Texas, Naples, Florida link there, because that came up. You remember, these people are calling around, telling other communities to set me up and say things about me that match what they say. So it's a pretty intense operation. It's a pretty intense operation. Very, very sublime and filling throughout the nation. So again, the same activity might be used against a criminal, a real criminal. What they're trying to do is make me a criminal. And it's a very, very intricate CIA technology operation to do that. I mean, they're altering somebody's personality over a period of decades. And that alteration can be called disabling, and in some cases cause suicide. That's your government, man. If you're not going to stop it, then that's your government. You are the subject of your least common denominator. Or you are the sum and summation of your least common denominator. That's just the way it is. And I know a lot of you are afraid of them. because you never know where they're going to come from, because there are CIA people and CIA type people. I have problems with all of it. And in some way, I have problems with all of you. Well, that's how we got to where we did, with a police officer just pulling out his gun and shooting Blake 7 times. And again, the idea of vilifying somebody after it's done is horrible. Trying to legitimize violence like that against a citizen, that's horrible. You know, we work every day in the government in places where people have committed crimes. Even in probation and places where we attempt to move rehabilitation programs, you know, we should just think because they've committed a crime that they don't warrant any justice or any forgiveness. So again, what we're seeing in law enforcement is antichrist type behavior where there's no reason to forgive somebody. You know, Jesus was not a cop by any stretch of the imagination. Now, if you're Christian and a cop, there's ways to carry yourself. And I'm not saying defund the police, but I'm thinking that we don't need to spend so much money on law enforcement if we can get something else done. But again, I began this by saying the beginning of all of it is spiritual. If you're empowering devils because they can empower you, then you're going to have these problems. Certain people don't get investigated in certain communities. Again, we can call that the political class and all of that. So I'm not making the same argument AOC is making, but there are likenesses because there is a truth within there. So when you see something like this rioting coming up, costing a lot of money, the president would rather the rioting not go on, I would imagine, unless he thinks it's a way to get elected. I don't know. I mean, if he could stop the rioting, I think his popularity would increase. Now, he might be elected anyway. But the problem is that we still have these issues. And we don't want to live in a war zone. Like I told you, my brother raised his son to be, a kind of Volvo Republican. And he's pretty liberal. And I told him, well, he's also 16. By the time he's 25, 30, he could be a little more conservative. But my brother speaks to him and tries to reason with him, saying, well, how does that program work? How are we going to get where you want to get to? Because remember, liberal governments are just as corrupt as conservative governments. The government right now is corrupt. The conservative governments are corrupt. They just are. Tell yourself that. The Bible tells us it is, then it is. So again, we have to be careful of what we're doing in the lives of people, because Jesus was not a Republican. Jesus was not a Republican. Wasn't a Democrat either. Wasn't even Christian. He was Jewish. So we need to make sure that we're not harming people. God had me think my part of my insurance was gone for a few days. And, I've never been against universal health care, but I'm thinking it needs to be prioritized higher, because that's considered suffering. And we are Christians, theoretically. No, it's the food there. Universal health care did not work. So, universal health care did not work. So why? Because it doesn't work. Universal health care, the way it was, the Obamacare, whatever you want to call it, didn't work. It wasn't constructed right. Absolute social medicine doesn't work today because we didn't start yesterday. But I'm not saying it should be social medicine. What does that mean? So we take a program like Medicare and we try to figure out, I mean, that's the starting point. And we try to figure out how to give Medicare to anybody that needs coverage. It's there. If you go into a hospital and you don't have coverage and you have a Social Security number, then you're covered. So whatever degree that covers you. No. God tells me if you use the same amount of effort that you're using for the space program, you have a problem and you have a starting point and you have to get to the end of that problem. And you've got all this money and all these people that you're moving to get to the end of that problem. Now, to God and to Jesus, it's kind of foolhardy. You know, I'm touching President Trump's pet program, but we need to speak about this. I'm not telling you not to do it. What I'm telling you, because I'm a big proponent of that, I brought that up even probably before anyone else, that we need to figure out how to build space stations and move to Mars and then the outer part of our universe and then beyond. And we need to build real estate somewhere for that. Space real estate and planetary real estate. However, to God and Jesus, it's foolhardy to run off after spaceships when you haven't put that same effort into relieving the medical issue. Now we have clinics, a lot of clinics today. I noticed that. So there is an attempt to fill void, fill gap. But even for me, when I'm trying to get somewhere with insurance, I'm not getting anywhere. Why? Again, devils, demons, antichrist, witches, and sorcerers. The same reason why you're not getting anywhere, and the same reason why you don't understand what you should do to make sure that doesn't happen. Because you have power, you have money. So a lot of times we say we're Christian, and we have a right to, because we are born again by the blood of the Lamb. However, it's kind of strange. There's no doubt that Jesus would be behind, not necessarily social medicine, because Jesus was intelligent. He would say, if we did this socialist type medicine, we would slow down in our care of others, and in the end, we would be possibly causing almost the same amount of hardship. So again, the problem is spiritual, not physical. The problem about universal health care is spiritual. It's being cursed away. People didn't earn it. They shouldn't get it. But these are the same people they cursed. Again, you speak about abortion. So you have the child born, And then the child is tortured because it doesn't have any insurance for its entire life, medical insurance, or gets shot, 6, 7 times whatever it is in the back. Now, the president said the officer did choke. Again, in law enforcement, we call it a bad shoot. He was getting in a vehicle. You can articulate a danger. You didn't know what he would do because of his mental state that he was in, agitated. But we don't know what was done maybe to not de-escalate that or not done. I'm eating here. It's very beautiful here in Amarillo to me. I hope my health is restored. And then now I know the ins and outs of everything. To a certain degree. I should have known this 10 years ago. Or 8 years, actually 10. I had a flare up about 10 years ago and a flare up 8 years ago. Probably maybe 11 years ago. 8 years ago. And my answer was to get 2 to 3 massages a month. And the government got in the way of that. I don't care who did it and how it was done, the government did it. The government has taken bold steps in criminal activity. And the way to legitimize it is sometimes using private sector entities. Now, we can go to missing and exploited children and we can say, well, that's a successful thing, it works for us. And of course, I'm part of that and I help with that. And I believed in it ever since I can remember. However, if a deep state operation, and I bring it up because that's what you call it, and again, it's corruption. If a corrupt entity with psychological manipulation ability were to get into that, it could make quite a mess. So again, there's a very big world out there. And that world is caused and moved by spirit. Good will, bad will, and then God's will. You see, having good will isn't always, and I explain this well, isn't always God's will. We are actually not to have a will. That's why it says, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Right now, Satan's will is being done on earth. That's why COVID-19 is here. That's why the riots are here. But it doesn't mean that the rioters are spiritually responsible. That begins where it begins. So again, cursing some things and willing a few things, and then the rioters appear. So again, we have these big watchers in the government, and a lot of them are evil. And they're watching somebody into suicide, death, disability. That's their enjoyment. That's their enjoyment. They'll tell you they're doing it for a certain reason. Maybe it's real, maybe it's not, but a lot of times you'll find it's not real. And in other cases, you'll find they create it with the psychology. Eating again here. We would not spend all the money we spend on psychological warfare, spycraft, and psychology programs of manipulation if it wasn't something that worked. Now, any number of entities could be using that, but if the government looks the other way, then it's government backed. It's part of the government. So, the evil thing that's upon us is being anti-powered by COVID-19. COVID-19 came here because the deep state wanted people harmed. And the deep state is a gatekeeper to what gets into the United States or not. So again, President Trump could not prevail against the deep state. And it got in, as well as other people. You know, we couldn't stop COVID-19 because the deep state wanted opportunity to harm people. Now, we see people in the streets and they're rioting. That's just as bad, or it may not be as bad, as people doing things using spycraft. Spycraft is a big word. Tradecraft is a big word that they use in the spy world. But that includes a ton of psychology and physical activity that causes changes in psychology to get what they want, get what they need. And that includes the opportunity to kill people, either through a third person that's manipulated to kill someone, whether they realize it or not, or through suicide or something like that, or even through causing somebody to be a drug addict or an alcoholic, or sexualizing them so they go out and have sex with a lot of people. The wind picked up here, brought in some allergens. So again, they know what they're doing. They've done it for decades. And they know they can start today in the life of somebody that's 30 years old and make profound downward changes in that person's life in the coming decades. There's something wrong with the government. Very wrong. It's demonic. Now, within government, there's other things going on. It's kind of that Pontius Pilate thing. They're going to blame me. But I have to do this. But you don't. You can stop the locomotion. And could have stopped the locomotion long ago. It's so strange. When I walk into my room, I can feel the demonic thing trying to push me out of here. The place where I live is not conducive to the deep state harming me. No. I've healed. I felt pretty bad when I woke up. I did something to my back. I felt a lot better. I took a Motrin. I'm hoping someday not to need that. The doctor yesterday was pretty positive that once I control the cramping in my back, everything will heal and settle down based upon, all the things I described. Again, why I can't get a simple steroid shot in my back, I don't know. I got another appointment tomorrow with a sports medicine doctor. He might say it's beyond him, but I'll say, fine, refer me. But I also have massage appointments finally. She's a fabulous person. Because, see, I'm psychic in nature. I know the spirit of things. So I know her and her place. Somebody's starting up their Harley. He's got 8 hanger bars on his Harley. And I have to say, my first day in Amarillo, there was motorcycles everywhere. I guess there's some sort of motorcycle thing going on here. But they had motorcycle clubs everywhere. All sorts of type. right? So, again, the spirit is where everything begins. That's how Satan takes over. Then we begin acting out physically. Again, when we look at Nazi Germany, I don't believe that President Trump is a Nazi, but his government has Nazi activity within it. You have to be careful about how you wave that flag. You see, so what is causing people to not like the flag? Is it that they're bad people? Are they possessed not to like it? I would say they're possessed. But what possesses them? How does it get through? What's going on? You're using flag waving for corruption. Not to say flag waving is corrupt. So you see, I'm coming back, get my health up, and I'll be able to go over everything all over again. And you might actually listen to me this time and fix everything. And then be wealthy. And not worry. And I know just the problem is so many of you are wealthy and really don't care if anyone else is wealthy. Now, President Trump has to get down to the individual level. What he's doing is triaging, and that's okay. But all great leaders also saw the individual. They could see the small and the big at the same time. I mean, you can win but not be a great leader. So how do you win those people? That's where President Trump was before he was elected the first time and in the beginning of his first term. How can I make those people, not make, but how can I get those people? How do I get them to like me? And he moved a few programs. It took a lot to get some things moving. The black vote was already leaving the Democratic Party before President Trump was elected because they saw the immigration causing issues for their people. Now, I always say that the two people that are fighting something, such as law enforcement and a criminal that are having an interaction, have more in common than anybody else on the planet, and more in common than any other group that they might be with. So it's incumbent to realize that when we're having an issue in an arrest scenario, the other person's issue may be out of your control, but it still exists. And it doesn't make it right for you to pull a gun out and shoot somebody in the back 7 times. Believe me, God's taking me through something? No, you're taking me through something and God is using it. So you have to realize that God doesn't want you to be harmed, but God will always use the harm that was caused to you to make things better in some way. So again, this is a place where I probably should have been. And I saw a glimmer of that when I purchased my Mini Cooper in 2015. So it would have been strong enough. If something else could have happened here that I was probably blocked from, I could have said, hey, I'm getting out of Santa Fe and I'm moving to Amarillo, and I would have been here. Boom. It would have been finished. Just like the day I left for Oklahoma. And the thing is, I drove through Amarillo, if I'm not mistaken. And I thought about it. But I couldn't get the thought. So again, I had TENS unit, couldn't use it. Made 3 appointments for massage therapy with one woman. All of a sudden I used another woman because they were minding it and cursing it. And the other woman was useless. So I'm like, well, why am I going to go and risk my life for COVID-19 and not even, she wouldn't even touch my bag. She would like daintily touching it. I'm like, oh, this ain't going to work. So I should have went to the other woman and I probably would have been released sooner. Probably would have noticed an increase right away. I may never have needed the orthopedic surgeons to do anything. So again, I have gotten it so everything is released and starts relaxing. So it's just hopefully a matter of time where I get somewhere. But that's for everybody. So this is the thing. We're all trying to get somewhere. We're all trying to get somewhere. But there were, once upon a time, rules in getting somewhere. I know you don't get to break the rules without the rules taking you out. That's the way it used to be. It's reversed. Satan is controlling the rules, and then that means there is no rules. It's just You make a deal with the devil, you do something demonic, and you win. Satan is paying, and they know it. So if you attack my life, you can get addicted to attacking my life, because every time you do it, you get an up from Satan. Somebody asked me what these birds were here in Amarillo. They have these black, every place I've been recently has had blackbirds, but these are pretty radical. They look like a road runner. I guess maybe it could be. I really like Amarillo, at least for now. I hope I heal, because I really want to be well here, and I can get into some charity. I don't know, the church scene seems a little weird, but you know, Jesus thought the synagogue scene seemed a little bit weird. I really would like to be in a church with people, and get to know people, but it might be the same old, just, you know, Jesus and God said, no, you got to get into a community, or you go back and live in the place where you or live with your brother, or live near your brother, or with your brother. And my brother was, you know, it took him a while to come around, but you know, he's being changed also. My brother and I both are being changed. You know, grace is definitely abounding in that my mother and I, and I'm not gonna say we grew closer. This is the weird part about it. Every time things happen a certain way, God will narrate it. And there's blocks. Again, it's spirit. So my mother and I couldn't be close, because if we were close, the punishment for being that close would be worse than the benefit of being close. So God says, no, you can't be as that close. My brother, him and I, every time we ever spent time together in life, it was generally a fun time. But him and I were never close. My brother's driven, you know, business. He's a different type of person than I am, and probably also different than my brother, the other brother. But he's being tested, I guess, to a certain degree. Or being changed, I would say. Not necessarily tested. You're not always being tested. How you doing? Not always being tested, you're being changed at times. So God's changing him. And all of a sudden, you know, hey, if I need you, can you come down here and help me get out of Texas? Yeah, I can do it. First he didn't say it, but then he eventually said it. Yeah, I can help you. I'm retiring in 6 months. I said, what if I need you before 6 months? Yeah, don't worry, I can do it. I can take some days off. Man, I was like, well, if I need to come up there, can I stay with you for a while? I'll have to ask my wife. Yeah. And she said, okay. But God had me try to get her phone number. He's like, well, why don't you give me her phone number so I can call her instead of bothering you all the time? Because I've been calling him like every day, a few times a day. But that started actually before I needed him. It's when he was with my mother, and I was we were all in COVID seclusion, and I was calling him and talking to him about things, and, you know, thanking him for taking care of my mother. So again, there's a lot of spiritual and small change going on around us. There's my creaky door. Do you hear it? My brother says I got to oil it. So again, the hope is that I heal. The doctor said, like I said yesterday, based upon what I said, he says it's the muscles are cramping and pulling on your nerves, and that's your problem. And I said, yes, that's what I tried saying since the beginning of this. And he said, well, the other doctors may have been focused on just trying to manage the pain versus treat it, which, you know, I don't expect him to destroy the other doctors, you know. I'm not looking for that. I'm looking to heal. Again, a lot of times when you're trying to heal, doctors are afraid that you're trying to do something to undermine their authority or to sue them. So here, I wanted to see if maybe I had a ripped hamstring when I was in Tyler. They were all paranoid. that I was trying to get a second opinion. And I'm thinking, I'm just trying to find out if I had a secondary injury. And of course, the sports medicine doctor could have looked at my back, my upper back. I mean, I couldn't get anywhere. Couldn't get anywhere. And then, to kick it all off, see, my left side is relaxed. It still cramps up a little, but not that bad. My right side is still stiff a little bit. But it's not, like, they thought, or in their mind, they're thinking it's just, from sciatica. No, it's my right side is still cramped a little bit, and it has to be worked out. Now, the massage did work that out. But what's the reality? It is all spiritual. If I had not been cursed, I wouldn't even be sick. Oh boy, it's beautiful here. The rain's moving in. So it's really strange. My life is revolving around people from India right now. So again, I just kind of kept this light, but yet made a few jabs while bringing up anecdotes and personal issues and things like that. But again, see, I'm a person. I'm a living person. I wasn't an abortion. I'm here. I've got, I think, a sister and a brother that were never born. They weren't abortions. They were miscarriages. Their spirit just appeared. Or spirits. So again, pro-life doesn't mean anything unless you embrace some of the social aspects, and George Washington is here with me, that our founding father brought up. So again, George Washington had a very conflicted life at times. The Bible itself is conflicted. But the key to the Bible is God helping you understand what it means and how it works for that given moment. Not to say that you have the license to do what you want when you want. But the Bible has enough information in it that God can remote control it in a certain way to work for everyone, no matter where we are. So a lot of people are offended. Well, it tells a slave to be happy with being a slave. Well, I guarantee there's slaves that escape that God told them to escape. And help them escape. So this is what the problem is with polarization. Politics polarizes today, completely polarizes. It used to be a season, and yeah, some people live political lives, but it used to be a season, and then everybody would go back to normal life. Now we're all in this together, and Nixon really, the president with the tear gas and all that. I thought he was going to do a Nixon moment. Nixon actually walked down there with the Secret Service after Kent State shooting and spoke with the quote-unquote hippies. That's what we needed. You're bringing people in, but you're still polarizing. Because people that are rioting are U.S. citizens, a lot of them, and maybe some aren't. So government is tasked with figuring out how to fix that. You say you don't want to be a nation where you put people in jail and throw away the key. That's kind of what we're seeing. So again, I think I'm going to overcome this in the coming month, 2 months ahead. That's the hope. Because it isn't really classic. They thought it was classic lumbar sciatica, and it's not. Now, I think my spinal erectors are part of it also. They were cramping up a little bit. But it's my upper back. It keeps pulling on the nerves. So again, when I began researching what might be wrong with me, I found this idea to be jumping out at me, and that's the fact that my spine was being pulled out of a line. And it was triggering everything else. And at this point, that's what it looks like. The answer in the end is chiropractic, but when your back is not softened, your chiropractor can't do anything. And you know what? I even went to a chiropractor in Tyler, Texas. I never had a more miserable experience. It just, nothing made sense, and he just seemed like he didn't want to see me ever again. It was just an evaluation. So I missed a lot of opportunity because of what? Spiritual activity, wickedness, wicked spiritual activity in high places. A government position is a high place. Don't confine your definition to be some politician. So again, trying to get my comfort and my mobility back to a greater level. I'm definitely doing better than I was in Tyler, Texas, and I'll tell you right now, it revolves around my upper back. So again, they're constantly moving spiritual wickedness to cause me not to matter, people not to listen to me. Their minds get blinded from something that would tell them to listen to me. In Naples, Florida, it was 8 years earlier, and I was able to get to a couple places to heal me real quick. Not so this time. The wickedness was absolutely increased before it even began. But I do surmise this thing was beginning months prior. I just didn't see the signs. Because again, being blinded. I mean, I remember taking these salt baths in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And then all of a sudden, my monitor agrees there, all of a sudden my bathtub started overflowing each time I tried. It was just I would fall asleep, something would happen. So I had to stop those because the landlord was getting angry. I mean, I cleaned it up each time. I had my own carpet cleaner. I went out in the hallway and took care of it. But that comes from the cursing. I was getting 2 to 3 massages a month, and then the deep state entered in. and cause panic attacks around massage. And only, I would say, only until arriving here in Amarillo has that been removed. It's not natural panic attacks. I don't naturally have panic attacks. It's the government. They were doing the same, and it's all spiritual, like I told you. And the private sector people that are with them, and the private sector people that aren't with them, but they let them do it because they know they're doing the dirty deed for them. So they are using psychological warfare, spycraft, psychological torture in open community, quite possibly surreptitious drugging. I know I've been surreptitiously drugged. When, where, and how, that's up in the air. Although I know specific instances. But yet they have programs that psychologically alter a person so it's like drugging them. It's your government. It's private sector. It could be Twitter. It could be Google. So again, no matter who wins the presidency, they're going to have to stop that activity. Calling it cancel culture really belies the truth. It's not the truth to call it cancel culture. It's spycraft. And there's people suffering everywhere out there. And you're all oblivious to their pain. And in fact, you're causing additional pain by moving spycraft. That's what's going on in the world. That's why there's issue in the world. You have local police that are being told that these are investigative techniques. My computer monitor agrees. They're not investigative techniques. They're psychological torture techniques. Now, in some cases it could be, but then again, it might not be expedient for the larger effort to use it at all, even though you see it possibly helping you. And quite frankly, that psychological torture technique is psychological murder. The government is murdering people. John Luna was murdered. Now, anybody investigating John Luna might or might not be responsible because there were other entities around it. So if you're an FBI agent, somebody might commit suicide, but not because, oh, something happened there. Not because of you, but because of a CIA operation around what you're doing. Now, Shazak said they did that because they were overworked. Well, yes and no. If certain things weren't used at certain points, then you wouldn't have gotten to that next level. Again, the idea of why does an officer feel okay with shooting somebody in the back in that car when they didn't produce a weapon, although the vehicle could be considered a weapon. My monitor agrees. But why? Why do we get to that point? Am I saying there's something wrong with the officer? In most cases, you'll find there's something wrong with something in the officer's life, and you'll find there's something wrong in the victim's life. If they could have got to massage therapy in Tyler, Texas, if they could have got to use the TENS unit in Tyler, Texas. If they'd have backed it up further, never even had to move to Tyler, Texas to find peace of mind. So again, the government itself is responsible for the failures, but yet there are people in the private sector that are part of it. So saying that somebody's a bad guy, therefore they get no consideration for being shot in the back, is a CIA trick. And if you really look at that particular case, and no woman has to give sex to anyone. No woman should be treated poorly, especially sexually. No woman should be assaulted sexually. I can keep going with that and get more explicit, but don't need to. I think you get the idea. However, when you look at investigations and sexual crime, Crump said he doesn't believe he would be convicted on those charges. There's a possibility that that would be true. And quite possibly the charges may have been dropped just prior to trial, or a deal worked out where he just, does some sort of counseling or something. It looks like to be that kind of case. I'm not sure, but it looks to be like one of those on again, off again relationships. And I think if we looked at both of their lives, there would be a lot of confusion and a lot of trouble that could be the source of the entire episode. So again, it's getting to be an hour now, and I'll be back later. Praise God in all that you do. Praise God.